Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Once Upon a Time, as well as the latest episode of Time After Time. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows I'm talking about. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of Once Upon a Time, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Time After Time. But the first thing we're going to talk about is Once Upon a Time. So a very good episode where kind of picking up where we brought up last episode. I kind of brought up like, oh, it's kind of interesting, the evil queen and Robin, because it's something he brought up in this episode. It's like, oh, they're actually kind of two very similar people, because the fact is that she's obviously the darker side of Regina's heart, and he's kind of a darker representation of Robin. He's kind of like the dark path Robin's life could have taken if things didn't play out the way they did in this reality. And it's like, oh, we're kind of peas in the pods and everything. And he brought up a very interesting thing that ends up being kind of the tailor to the entire show. I mean, this particular episode is the fact is that he's like, oh, maybe I wasn't here. You know, obviously I'm here for a reason. Maybe my reason here isn't to be here for Regina. Maybe I'm meant to be here for you. That I'm supposed to be your second chance or whatever. Because really quickly, going to explain some things I thought was fascinating. Obviously, the Tinkerbell makes a reappearance, which she is played by the lovely Rose McIver, which, you know, if you don't know, she plays Olivia Moore on iZombie. Which, side note, it wasn't until today I really thought about her name a lot, you know, because a lot of people shorten her name to Liv, and it's like, oh, Liv Moore, her name is literally an would it be considered? I think an oxymoron. Yeah, oxymoron would technically, ironic, I guess, would be more so than. Nevertheless, did not realize that was her, because I think at the time when Tinkerbell, which I completely forgot she played Tinkerbell, or that Tinkerbell had ever popped up at all in the show. But I think the last time she popped up was like in the episode where that whole tattoo situation came up, and I would think that was like season 3, wasn't it? Or at least I think like the second half of season 3, maybe. But nevertheless, that was so cool. I was like, Rose McIver, that's so awesome. And because I never really get to hear her talk, because obviously on iZombie she uses puts on an American accent. So obviously in this episode we get to hear her accent a little bit. It's like, I think the proper term for someone from New Zealand is Kiwi, right? I could be 100% wrong about that. I think so. But nevertheless, the whole point was like, oh, the fact is that she turned her back on that opportunity. All she had to do was walk into that bar and meet with him, and she could have been happy, but she was kind of too afraid. I guess more so than anything, it's like the fact is that she lost love once, and she was too afraid to let go of the hate she had inside. But then again, like Tinkerbell kind of brought up another thing, is like, the fact of the matter is, it's not even that you're scared to love again, it's that you feel like you don't deserve to love. Because in this episode, also, we had Henry kind of lying and be like, oh, this is all about going, I learned this thing from your mom's spell book that'll help us track down Snow White. Actually, it was to help her track down like a bow, Cupid's bow, that would basically help her kind of find the way to like the person with the tattoo, because he heard it from Tinkerbell. I wonder what ever happened to her. I don't know. Like I said, maybe she's popped up before and I don't remember, but definitely like the tattoo thing is the only other time I think she's popped up to my knowledge. So, I mean, granted, like I said, it's kind of the whole situation with iZombie, so I'm sure it's like she might not have that many opportunities. I mean, granted, depending on filming schedules and production schedules, like whether or not she'd be available to do it or not. But it's like, I don't know where she stands in the grand scheme of just like if she's heard Storybook or she died in the Enchanted Forest, whatever the case may be. Nevertheless, upon hearing this, like, oh, like, you're the one person I never thought would betray me, Dad. Screw you. I hate you for this. It's like, okay, Bo, you know, she uses her dark magic to basically like, okay, find me the person that I hate most, and it leads her back to the castle. It's like, oh, Snow White must be hiding here, thinking she can hide from me in a place where I'm away. And then it's like she opens the closet, and then she's like, what's up? And then this doesn't make any sense. Where is she supposed to be here? It's supposed to take me to the person I hate most. Happens to look, the arrow had hit the door, and on the other side of the door was a mirror. And it's like, dude, that broke my heart. It's like, and even Henry was like, her dad being like, oh, Regina. I'm like, dude, that is just sad, because it's like the person she hates the most is herself, because it's like, no matter what's all said and done, like for her, like, Snow White was just an excuse, like more so than anything. It's just she was mad at herself for being so mad at everyone else about something, because it's like you know, at that point, she heard a lot of people. She had even said something to Tinkerbell as well as the other villagers, being like, "Oh, I love you. Snow White doesn't. I actually care about you. Thank me for this opportunity where I've spared all your lives, because next time it won't be like that." The fact is that she was so mean and cruel and everything, and killed a lot of people, that it just deep down she hated herself for it, but she needed to keep going, because it's like because it's the whole mentality of like, as a villain, it's like the moment she gets her revenge on Snow White, everything will be resolved. And that's something Henry even brought up to the evil queen herself, not Regina, but the evil queen. Like, you know, you've kind of won. You kind of messed with Snow White and Prince Charming, but does it make you feel better? It's like, no. He brought up the fact that he's like, there's good in you. I know there is. Just like there's a little evil inside of my mom, you know, Regina. But obviously her plan is to snip, using the shears. She plans to separate herself from Regina for the purposes of, you know, it's like once they're separated, then she can kill her. But, I mean, like I said, it's the sad thing is because, like, you know, when you look at an evil queen, all you see is who Regina once was. And that just makes it even sadder, because it's like you see, like, it's just a repeat of history. You saw how things turned out for Regina as the evil queen. And it's like the evil queen story will nevertheless be the same. And going back to what Robin was saying, like, you don't have to do this. Like, if you do kill Regina, there's like a town full of heroes who will take you down. It's like your story won't end well. But, she was so angry and wanting to fight, because when you actually break it down, and it's like something I'd never thought about too, is like Regina tried to kill her. Like Regina, when she originally separated them, tried to kill her. It's like, you tried to kill me. The fact is that she looks at Regina, she looks at her and hates her for everything that she has, because everything that Regina has is something that she's always wanted. But it's like, I don't get that happening in the, like, you know, I was a part of you and you cast me aside and tried to kill me. And then it's something that Regina, like, you know, she was about to kind of deal the blow by like crushing her heart, but then she kind of looked in the mirror and it reminded her. She was like, no, like, this isn't how this is supposed to be. The fact of the matter is, finally kind of accepting herself, like, I mean, kind of in, like, it's a very meta episode in the sense of accepting herself and loving herself, because she's always disliked and like hated herself on some level, never really accepting all there is to her. Because now Regina realizes it's like, no, like, you know, this isn't kind of the right way to do things. I thought with the episode, like I brought up countless times before, I was like, okay, when it's all said and done, Regina's going to have to be the one that kind of combine back with the evil queen to bring her darkness back into check. But it's like, no, she did something that surprised me. I was like, I was not expecting that. She already had the evil queen's heart out. She ripped out her own heart and she put them close together. Now they're equally balanced. The fact is, she shared a little bit of her love with the evil queen, and the evil queen gave a little bit of, and she took in some of the evil queen's darkness, because of the fact of the matter is that they are part of each other. And the fact is that, you know, kind of accepting both sides of her, finally accepting both sides of herself, letting the dark side of her realize that, you know, this feeling is to love and be loved, that you don't have to be scared of it. And then welcoming the darkness back into her, because it's like, it's not fair for me to leave all this darkness just, I mean, not really expressed that way, but to me, I interpret it that way. Like, all for this darkness just to be yours. And it was just like a sweet, touching moment. It's like, it had the same resolution, but it wasn't this, it didn't have the final result as I was expecting, because, obviously she helped Robin get back to the other world. Regina did. I mean, the evil queen did. And so it came down to, it's like, so what do you know, Regina's willing to give her the chance, but you have even someone like Snow White and even Zelena be like, really? She's the evil queen? Which I'm like, I'm surprised Zelena would be so okay with it. But I guess to be fair, it's a situation where it's like, I guess she would prefer, even though she's not really the biggest fan of Regina, she still trusts Regina a lot more than the evil queen. Because to be fair, I forgot, the evil queen did try to kill her at one point, especially when the whole evil queen and Rumpelstiltskin situation was happening. I was like, right, that, yeah. So it's like, obviously she's not the biggest fan of her, so she'll accept Regina any other day. But it's like, you can't trust her, the fact that she's done so many horrible things, but then Regina's like, I mean, it's kind of ironic, because it's like, you're talking about her, but it's like, you gave me a second chance. I mean, literally, that was me, and you gave me a second chance. You believed in me. She's like, oh, you're different. It's like, no, they're not. They're the same person. Like I said, it's just a repeat of history. The evil queen is literally Regina without her heart kind of being there. I mean, granted, you saw little peeks of her heart, because when she had Robin digging up for the shears and stuff, you see her kind of looking at him with almost like a sad look in her eyes. I was like, is that her kind of wanting to be with this Robin? Because it's like, even if that wasn't her Robin, she she still felt it just the same way she looks at Henry and still looks at him as like, you're my son and I love you. You may not believe it when it's all said and done, but I do love you. And he does finally call her mom, which is like, Henry's kind of putting everyone to shame. He's like, yeah, I have like 3 moms. I'm awesome. You know, it's almost like to me, I think it's kind of a bragging, right? It's like, oh, you have 1 mom, you have 2 moms? I have 3. Technically, I do have 2, but now it's kind of 3 now too. So it's like, but I appreciate the fact is that Regina and the Evil Queen are separated and that they are their own person. I thought that was kind of interesting. I figured it's like when it was, because I was hoping when it was all said and done, obviously when we found out that they were both staying separate, I was like, oh, at the very least maybe we can make it so that she goes to where Robin goes. But obviously using the author's pen, Henry writes, well, obviously a place where she can get a fresh new start. But she even made this whole apology. She's like, yeah, I'm sorry for everything that I've done to you, Snow. Again, you know, doing it to you again. But the fact is that she helped Regina out. It's like, it's a little complicated, but, you know, now they know where to start, where they can fix the whole Prince Charming and Snow White situation. But, man, like, it kind of fills my heart with a little, like, yay, when you find out that, you know, she ends up in that world with Robin and it just, like, being all cute and everything. And then it's like, technically Tinkerbell was right, because it's like Regina never got that happy ending wasn't hers, because she felt like it was taken away from her. But she's like, no, you know, it was something that, you know, it happened, and that basically technically it was right, because it's like, oh, that was going to be the Evil Queen's happily ever after, which technically it is, but it's just because Regina and the Evil Queen are 2 different people now, so it's like that's her happy ending. Technically Regina's, hers is still in progress, but she has a lot of stuff, because it's like, I love it. I mention it all the time. I love the fact is that Regina refers to the Charmings, just the entire family, as her family. Whether it's Emma, you know, Prince Charming, or Snow White, they're part of her family just as much as like Henry's her son. They're her family because she loves him. It's like, even when it was like, oh, I'm gonna fight the Evil Queen, it's like, no, let me help you. It's like, no, you guys are too important to me to let you get hurt in this. Besides, it's my battle. I'm the one that has to deal with this. And I was like, oh, when she said stuff like that, it's like, oh, it's like it's so interesting when you look at, I mean, when you see who the Evil Queen was and compare it to who Regina is now, and it's like, I'm very interested to see, like, obviously she found the perfect balance, in my opinion. So I'm very curious to see would that have any not necessarily any huge ramifications. Maybe it will, but I'm thinking more so than anything, it's just like her kind of readjusting. Like, got a little darkness in my heart. My heart's a little heavier, but, you know, it feels right that she finally feels balanced. But, because there was also something the Evil Queen had brought up to her. She's like, you know, if you could, would you ever, like, if you could go back and, like, to that moment, would you go into the bar? And then Regina was kind of like, honestly, I wouldn't. Because if it wasn't for her running away from Robin, she wouldn't be where she is now. She wouldn't have all the people in her life. She never would have eventually led to her creating the spell that brought in the storybook. Everything wouldn't be where she wouldn't be where she is right now. So that life with Robin, like, you know, walking into that bar is for the Evil Queen. But Regina's life is still a work in progress. So it's like, at the very least for now, it seems like the Evil Queen has her happily ever after. I am very curious though, because as we know in that world, the Evil Queen is supposed to be dead, but maybe it's like a different version of that world that they came back to, because it's like Henry's still around, his grandparents are, and Emma's not in that world, but at least he's still there. That might turn into something later on, but the fact is that he was super pissed like last time Regina was there, so it's like, maybe that'll turn into something, maybe it won't. We'll just kind of have to see. At the very least for now, let's be optimistic and think like, no, that's their happily ever after. I think we might run into them at some point going forward, but maybe not. We'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. Now, the other side of the episode dealt with Hook dealing with his whole situation, because he has a conversation with Captain Nemo, because Nemo's about to ship out, and he's like, okay, so he confesses to him, and like he's the only other person that knows the truth. So Nemo's like, basically, keeping a secret, guilt is the exact word to use. Guilt can be as corrosive to a heart as revenge is, because revenge just kind of pollutes your heart till there's nothing left. Obviously, because it deals heavily with the storyline with the Evil Queen, because it's like, even when you get your revenge, it won't fill that hole in your heart. You won't make you feel better. It's just the constant theme, especially, you know, previously Prince Charming wanted to get his revenge, but it wouldn't have done anything. But nevertheless, it's like, either you keep that secret, you know, either you tell Emma the truth, or you keep that secret and learn a way to kind of forgive yourself for your guilt. And it's something Killian says too, is the fact that he didn't do either. He put the memories in a dream catcher, and Emma ended up catching them. So he didn't actually, it would have been different if he had come to her and told her, but the fact is that he was about to burn those memories, because it's not even just the fact is the bad thing that he did, which is like, yeah, it sucks that he did that, and he knows, and it's like, oh, my family would look past that, we'd forgive you. I mean, look at Regina and everything. It's like, but I think for him, it's a combination of things. For one, they put so much faith in him, especially like after everything was said and done with Prince Charming. He was like, no, at first he was like, no, I'm sorry, I treated you like a pirate, but it's like finding out that it was actually Killian that killed his dad, like maybe it changed its feelings a little bit, but it's more so than anything, it's because it's like, I can't live with it. But Emma's like, the fact of the matter is, that's why I'm here. Like, you don't keep secrets from me. Like, we've learned that. We've countlessly learned that over and over again, how keeping secrets is a bad thing. The fact is, let me be there for you. Lean on me so that, you don't have to handle anything alone. That's why I'm there. And it's like, she gives the ring back, because it's like, the man that I love would know that, so he wouldn't have done something like this. So kind of basically become that man again, which for Killian, he was about to leave with Nemo, because he was like, I have to basically venture out, become that man again, and come back, find out who that guy was, find some way, whether it's like to decide what he's going to do. Is he going to tell Emma's family the truth, or is he going to keep it and just, because it's just a combination of like, I think it's more so the combination that he wants to tell them, and he wants to learn how to live with himself after what he did, because it's like, how can I sit across from your dad knowing what I did to his father, But, he hears from Snow, and Snow tells him basically what happened with the evil queen, that basically she got hurt happily ever after, because for him, he had previously said near the beginning of the episode, like, as a villain, he tricked himself into believing like a villain could have a happily ever after. It's like, your past doesn't define you. What defines you is what you decide to do with that past. Do you let it 100% define you, or do you decide to carve out your own path? Regina's is the perfect example of that. Rumpel's still kind of on and off the fence. He's tried, but it's just always kind of pulled him back in. So I'm very interested to see where his story kind of plays out. But, I feel like a lot of that might play a big role in his story, considering Gideon being back, trying to save Gideon's soul. But in the process of saving Gideon's soul, who's to say he's not diving his soul even deeper, his heart and soul deeper and deeper into the darkness. But for him, I guess it's like, I'm already steeped in it. I've always been there, and I always will be. So if it's for the sake of my son, it's okay for me to dive even deeper. I'm already there and can't get much worse, I guess, in his opinion. I mean, it's kind of a thought process. But hearing from Snow, because Snow had been like, because Snow was the most judgmental, but then it's just like, it made me realize, like, love can kind of fix even the most darkened of souls. Like, the fact is that basically there is no such thing as there is no redemption for someone. There's always redemption. There's always the opportunity to do better. And so that kind of inspired Killian to not give up. It's like, if the evil queen can find redemption, she can find a happily ending, then at least at the very least, he owes it to himself. He owes it to Emma and her family to give it a try. Well, she goes to tell that to Nemo, but before he can, he has, Gideon pops up and makes the ship leave with Killian on board. He's saying that he needs Killian out of the way. Now, to me, I assume this is like some means, well, two things. Either one, he's going to disguise himself as Killian to get close to Emma, and then when the opportunity strikes, he's able, well, probably two things in that regard. So technically it's three. One, it could be get close to her in the means of waiting for the opportune time to strike. Two, it could be get close to her so that she lets her guard down, and then he like destroys her, like disguises Killian, he breaks her heart and leaves her vulnerable. And three kind of goes along that same line too, is have Killian away, because for him, he probably looks at it as, Emma's stronger when the people that she loves are around her. But if I pick them off and send them away, if I start slowly chipping away at it, the people around her, she kind of loses her shield and her kind of savior instinct to protect the people that, well, not even just savior instinct, but just her instinct to protect and fight for the people that most important to her. So that's what I chalk it up to. But I mean, it might be a combination of all of that. So it's just like, he's obviously putting his plans forward, and it's like, I'm very curious to see what those plans entail going forward, because it does leave Emma in a position too, because she comes back home, no Killian, and the fact is that she gave the rain back, and the fact is Snow's probably going to bring up, it's like, oh yeah, I saw him down below, like, you know, at the bay or whatever, and it's like, oh, or at the harbor, and it's like, oh, he never came back. It's like, no. So for her, she might admit the truth to her family. It's like, Killian, I found out the truth about Killian, and it's like, I don't know, did he leave? And then, you know, I think more so than anything, it is kind of it seems like, now I'm sitting here saying that exactly, it seems like more so than anything, it is to wound Emma's heart, because will make her think, like, maybe even on some, I'm sure it's going to turn into a situation where she's like, no, I don't doubt Killian, but at the same time, it's a situation where they're in a very rough spot, so he picked the opportune time to strike, because he knew, maybe he already knew that things were kind of going that direction, so. But Killian didn't have a chance to kind of correct things. So I'm very interested to see how that all turns out. Very interested to see, does this mean where exactly Killian, as well, I mean the Nautilus in general, where it's heading. As we saw last episode, it does seem like Zelena and Regina have kind of buried the hatchet a little bit. So it's like, I was kind of worried that obviously things would happen, you know, with that Robin would kind of be a bad guy, but it turns out that's not the case. So a little less things to worry about, because the Evil Queen's got to be taken off the marker, off the chessboard. So it's not even like Gideon has her to rely on. So, just overall, very good episode. It's like, it fills you with so much hope. It's a situation, you know, when you're that person, when you kind of not liking the person you see in the mirror, you know, you got to learn to love yourself above anything else. You know, it's not, I mean, it sounds easy, but it's not the easiest thing for some people, myself included. So it's just, I guess for that, the episode kind of spoke volumes to me, is the fact is that, you know, you got to accept all sides to you. Like, if you want to change, then change, present yourself the opportunity, give yourself the chance to change, and you might surprise yourself. I know that's kind of very like, I feel it's douchey if I'm like, oh, I'm so philosophical. You couldn't see it, but I like did the, you know, the thing where you push your glasses up and it's a whole thing that would have worked better if this were video, but these are just audio. So yeah, nevertheless, like, I'm super excited to see where the next episode decides to take us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Time After Time. So in this episode, we learned some very interesting things. It appears, I guessed the motive right last episode, where I surmised that Griffin and Brooke are doing this all for the sake of revenge. That, you know, it's kind of interesting because, you know, obviously, you know, for them, it's like Vanessa's family, like, destroyed our family, so basically, it seems like all this is for, like, even Griffin being with her was all for the purposes of getting close to her, because somehow they knew that eventually HG, you know, John, as well as the time machine would pop up here, so they'd be able to take full advantage of it. I'm assuming it's for the sake of going back in time and fixing what was taken from them and taking it back. So it's legitimately a revenge story. What I find very interesting about the whole circumstances is that you see that Griffin is kind of like, oh yeah, we don't have to do that. You know, if it's not too late, we can actually turn back. And Brooke is like, I get it. You have feelings for Vanessa. You don't want to hurt her and everything. But it's like, the fact of the matter is, you know, that's kind of the point. You were supposed to get close to her, but don't forget everything that her family's done to ours. And that's the sad thing. It's not like Vanessa knows, like, you want to punish her for something her parents did, something she didn't know anything about? Because the thing that happened to your parents, your family, it happened as we saw last episode. She was literally 3 years old. But for them, it doesn't matter, because the fact is that she's grown and advanced from advancements that were stolen from their dad. Which, an interesting thing too is in this episode we see that Brooke is kind of continuing his research. Basically, she kind of experiments on Griffin a little bit, which is kind of interesting, using her own brother as kind of a guinea pig. I guess in this particular circumstance, it's like, well, it's been tested, so it's okay. But she ends up using something to kind of heal the wound on his body. And so we also find out that basically that guy, I think it's the same guy from last episode that was locked up. Maybe it's a different dude. But basically, she kind of shows that she's kind of enhanced his body to the point, like, the equivalent, she said, is basically he's got this one dude has the strength of 6 men, and it's basically all based on research their father was working on, which I find very fascinating, because it's like, oh, this isn't just a time travel show. Like, the science fiction is spreading on the other angles too. It's like, oh, we're really, wow, it sounds like your dad was, I mean, granted, to be fair, it's like, obviously it was probably meant for more medical purposes, but the fact of the matter is, it's like, you know, well, in the sense of like, because she, like, Brooke kind of uses it as an example of like, oh yeah, like every soldier that's ever in combat or whatever could use this, to patch himself up immediately, the whole like thing she used to heal Griffin. But the fact is that it kind of pushes that like almost mad scientist level, because it seems like, I mean, especially when you combine the fact is why Brooke is doing this, it's like, oh, she wants to do the research that their father started, kind of pick up, where he left off and get back all his life's research that was stolen from him. Essentially, you mix that with a bit of a great mind with anger and vengeance, and you kind of get a mad scientist. And where I'm seeing, like, it seems like that might be where Brooke's character is going, especially because later on in the episode, Vanessa was meeting up with a dude who had some files connected to that day, the Utopia project, because he's the one that he reveals it to Vanessa that things might not have been on the up and up when her dad, like a lot of the projects and stuff that came from Project Utopia, that a lot of that stuff wasn't originally from him, that he stole it from somebody. So now it's kind of setting Vanessa on the path to find it all out. But essentially, Brooke sent someone to kill the dude. Basically, made it look like he had a heart attack. Which there was that creepy moment where Vanessa was walking down the hall. It's like, is there anyone here? And you see him. They kind of do the serial killer thing where he just like goes past her behind and she kind of turns around. I was like, that was not just kind of eerie. That was pretty eerie. And it's like, that was well placed. That was really good, done. I was about to say goodly. That was very well done. Because obviously I'm sure he's been given orders not to hurt her, because it's like, I don't think I mean, if anything happens to her, that just causes more problems for them. They need to make everything seem 100% okay. Obviously, Griffin being a senator and on his way to becoming senator and everything. I wonder what that's going to be all about too. Like, I guess what they want to do is, I guess, put themselves in a higher position where it's like Vanessa can never come after them afterwards, or just, I guess, or their ambitions go beyond. I guess if he's in a senator high enough position, that maybe he can kind of possibly correct some of the mistakes of the past. But like I said, that's what I feel like the time machine's for too. So it's like, I don't know. Like I said, I'm very interested to kind of dive in more about what they're doing. And now, I mean, I should have really known last episode, because like Brooke kind of stepped up, kind of mad scientist angle last episode of like why she wants to spend so much time inside of John's head in particular. So it's like, it seems like a situation where she's like, everyone's kind of a test subject. I mean, we really haven't really been given an opportunity, because it's like, as we obviously saw, she played John like a fiddle just to get close to him because she knew what was going to go down. But at least with Griffin, he does care about Vanessa. It is a situation where it's like, well, at the very least, he feels some regret. I'm very curious to see if we're going to see a situation where Brooke is probably a little bit more like John than she'd like to admit, or anyone else would like to admit. So, but in this episode, the team, HG and Jane, ended up finding out about John's son, Henry, and that basically he went back in time to save his son. Obviously, HG was like, oh, Jane, you can't come. And Jane's like, wait, what? Like, what kind of sexist crap is this? You want to protect me? Kind of like, oh, the frail woman? It's like, no, it's like 2017. Don't be talking that crap. It's like, and eventually Griffin kind of explains it too. It's like, no, I won't want the person that I love to go off in a place like World War I, because it's like 1918. And she's like, what? Hey, she doesn't love me. He's like, well, the way you talk to each other, the way you spend, like you are when you're around each other, obviously you are in love, or at the very least you're nearing it. She's like, I feels bad, when it's all said and done and he has to go back. And then she's like, oh, right, he has to go back. And it's like, right, there was kind of a similar circumstance in something else recently, and I don't remember what it was. It's going to bother. Oh, Legends of Tomorrow. It kind of has the same concept with, Nate and Amara. But nevertheless, it was a situation where I was like, I forgot to even think about that for the show. It's like eventually he'd have to go back in time and leave Jane. And it kind of comes up later in the episode when he's kind of not in the right state of mind, because he's on the the medicines and stuff, the drugs that kind of make him the anesthesia that they're using and everything. He's like, man, it basically he's like, he cannot believe he feels the way he does about her. It's the reason why he cares so much. And the fact is that, it breaks his heart, because he's like, at someday I am going to have to go back. She's like, well, it's not today, but he's like, yeah, and that is, but the truth is it will be someday. And he's like, I'm going to have to live my life without you. And he's like, I don't even want to think about it. And it's like, oh, shut up, Wells, saying some cheesy, beautiful stuff like that. It's like, stop it. It's already bad enough. It's sinking in, and now you're adding more to it. It's like, you almost see Jane's heart being broken, because it's like, stop saying that stuff. You're gonna upset her, dude. It's like, nah, live in the moment, enjoy it. Because especially when we had the whole conversation about fate and everything, it's like, oh, it's fate and destiny that brought us together and everything, which I feel like plays a big part in this episode, which I'll kind of hurry up and get to. But it's just like, that was just so sweet and touching. It's like, I want you two to be good, because like I said, like I brought it up before, I think the actors have very good chemistry, because it's like, you can feel it. It's just like they brighten up when they're around each other. They're like the best versions of themselves when they're around each other. It's like, yeah. I'm sorry. Nevertheless, obviously John meets his son Henry, and to him he brings up the conversation of like, oh, you know, Henry is a doctor too, and he brings up the fact that, oh, Henry, you must it must be a different feeling, because obviously you're a doctor and everything. It must be a different feeling taking another life. And he's like, no, I don't, you know, he's like, I don't revel in it, kind of like John. But John's kind of poking and prying. He's like, oh, because it was something Brooke had said in the episode. It's like, oh, the fact is that, you could horse John would want to go back to see his son because he's narcissistic, and be like, oh yeah, there's a part of me living on that, you know, that egotistical side, to be like, oh, this child of mine, Henry, will carry on, you know, my line with his generation, so forth and so on. I'm granted, you know, that Henry ends up dying, but because, you know, HG confronted him, was like, you can't do this because you don't know what the ramifications might be. Like, saving this one life may kill countless, which John is kind of like, oh, it's kind of very interesting. Basically, the whole concept of chaos is unavoidable. The fact is, war is just something you can't hide from, you can't beat down. It's a beast that just keeps coming back stronger and stronger. Which, you know, George doesn't kind of believe that. The fact is, you know, because he always believed in kind of a peaceful utopia in the future, which obviously his hopes are dashed. But for him, he starts asking the question, like, well, John, are you even doing this for Henry? Do you even care about him? And, you know, for John, like, to me, I was at the beginning, I was like, no, he doesn't. This is all about, because he wants to make sure, he wants to see if his son's like him. And then he was like, no, but the fact of the matter is, isn't this an opportunity to let me do it? So obviously John gets away, and ends up, like, you know, he ends up talking to, because at first I was wondering, I was like, why does, like, Henry talk so much crap about his dad? I was like, is it because he knows his dad is like, you know, abandoned him? It's like, oh, he's this and that. I'm like, why does he? I was like, oh, right. And then it clicked in my head, right. When John disappeared, everyone found out about him being the Ripper the day him and HG left. I was like, right. So it probably spread out like wildfire that John was the, and that's probably why, like, maybe at some point in time she would have eventually told John, like, Henry's mom would have eventually told him that she was pregnant, but then finding out he was a Ripper, like, she wanted to keep as much distance between her son and his father, just because, like, didn't want him to end up that way. Which for John is like the reason why he wanted to save his son so much. He's like, why do you want to save me? Why would he want? Why? Because obviously pretending not to be, you know, his dad at first, but be like, why would he want to save? Because you're nothing like him. It's like, you know, because for him there's a little spark. He even says it that. And if someone as evil as me, as twisted as I am, can do something as good as you, someone who's not a killer, who actually cares about other people, you know, it means, like, I've done some good in the world, you know. I guess add a little, make it so that he isn't, like I said, because I thought that's an interesting element of the show that they've, like, brought up from the very beginning of the series so far. Is the fact is of that the duality within himself fighting the monster within him. You know, and now you see, like, he wants there to be good. He wants to be good in some sense, but it's like the monster in him just thrives, and it just, you know, I think he kind of laughs it off and gives more to the monster, but it does bother him on some level what he does. I mean, best example is, like, in, what was it, like, the second episode, the woman, like, when he got pissed at Jane about the whole, like, key situation, he could have easily have killed her, but he didn't, because I thought that's what he did, but he let her go. So it does show that he does have that side to him. He does have some good buried deep with it, especially later on in the episode when he ends up helping Wells. But what blows my mind even more is kind of what I was bringing up earlier, the whole destiny versus destiny and fate situation, is that even when he saved his son, that basically the convoy that he was with ended up getting attacked and no one survived. And everyone's like, okay, that's how he died. But then it's like, no, he dies at the cafe because there's a sudden attack and he goes back inside to help people, and that's when he dies. Now the question is, like, the fact is that even when John tried to intervene and save his son still ended up dying. So it's like he was always meant to die, that it was always going to play out that way. Because then I start thinking some Final Destination stuff. I'm like, so is it a situation where no matter what, if it's your time, at some point time is going to catch up with you some point? Or is it like a situation where it's like, no, the reason why he dies in that cafe is because John is always supposed to go back in time, stop him from getting on a convoy so that he dies in the cafe? Because I was wondering, I was like, oh, because everyone was so certain that he died on a convoy. So I was like, did time change? But it's like, no, because if time had changed, I don't think Jane would have been protected from it and remembered it that way. I don't think time travel works in this particular case like that. So I was like, that's fascinating. So it's like, which way is it? Is it like time would have caught up to him anyway? Or is it because, I think it is more so, maybe it's kind of implied both, a combination of some sort, that basically when it was all said and done, John was always meant to go back in time to save his son. Like, it's just a cycle, you know? Which, at the end of it all, like, he does help, like I say, John to get back to the time ship because he sees Jane, like, brokenhearted and crying, and, like, it's like, help him, you're a doctor and everything, which I say, like, I think Jane can kind of tap into that human side of his heart. But, I guess also just seeing, because also, I guess also on some level, HG was also his friend, too. And I guess, like, even though he is what he is, it can't change the fact is that they had this friendship. Which, there was that interesting conversation where he's like, oh, you're Vanessa, huh? I can't wait till the next time we meet. You know, because basically bringing up the fact is that, like, oh, I helped HG, so they give me some little leeway with this whole situation. It's like, yeah, you might have helped him, but it doesn't undo all the terrible things that you've done. So, which to me is like, seems like they're setting it up, be like, yep, this is obviously foreshadowing to something later on in the timeline where it's like, oh, him and Vanessa cross paths again, where it's like, oh, he corners her or something like that. I don't know. But which to me, what this says to me is that eventually, just for the sake of the one thing he would have been fighting for is for the sake of his son, but now it's like, that's not worth fighting for anymore because his son's dead. Now it's all going to be, like, my mind is like, oh, obviously he's going to be 100% deciding to work with Brooke and Griffin, because for them it's like, for him it'll probably be a situation where he hates HD and them, because for HD was literally telling him to let his son die, and he's like, no, I'm not going to. Which I can only assume that's going to come into the future too, because it's going to be like, Jane might be in a similar circumstance, or maybe even Vanessa, and he has to choose, like, okay, do I go back and save them or not? Because he's been so adamant about, like, securing the timeline to make sure it stays the same way. But it's like, that's the fact is, because it hasn't been someone that's close to him. Like, when the shoe is on the other foot, we'll have to see what John decides to do. Will it just be so clear cut, or will there be a very big gray area? But I feel like John's probably going to join up with Brooke and Griffin and decide, like, oh, I need to destroy them. You know, it's like, oh, you can do whatever you want to as long as I have access to the time machine too, and they're kind of fine with it, maybe. Which I'm sure, like I said, it seems like more so than anyone, everyone other than them is kind of a tool for the situation. So I'm very curious to see where it goes from here, especially like with Brooke and all the experiments she's running. Like, what other stuff has she done based on her dad's research and stuff. I'm very fascinated to see how that all plays out, and especially find out what Vanessa. It seems like Vanessa found something out in the research at the end of the episode, because you remember, like, they still haven't told Vanessa the 100% truth that they know, that her dad David killed a guy, covered up the murder, along with the fact that he stole something from somebody else. So it's kind of sad for Vanessa, because she's like, oh, she thinks she's got at least she's got Griffin on her side, being there, supportive, being her husband. But it's like, nope, he's there kind of waiting for the opportunity to stab you in the back. Once again, I'll reiterate, at the very least, he feels somewhat bad about it. The fact is, Brooke is kind of like, you know, obviously, because I wonder, who did she meet first? Did she know Brooke from, like, school? Was it a situation where Brooke got close to him and it was like, oh, you should meet my brother? And it's like, oh, you know, flirt with her a little bit, get closer. So was it like a two-pronged attack? Like, oh, we'll become two important people in her life. So, or I don't know, because like the way it's hard to say, like in the last episode when she brought Brooke, it could be just like, oh, this is my sister-in-law, or it's like, oh, this is my friend my best friend who eventually became my sister-in-law type of situation. Like I said, we just kind of have to see, but I'm very interested to find out which. Now, I forgot, we found out that basically on the Utopia stuff, it had John's name on it. So it was like John Stevenson, and it's like, wait, what? So this is more like time travel stuff. So I'm assuming this is why they know about it, because like at some point John goes back in time and becomes part of this Utopia project, and maybe that's where all of his research starts, because maybe all this time travel has some kind of effect on people's bodies, or at the very least it's like comparing someone from their time and someone this time. Obviously certain things in their bloodstream and their bodies are a little different, so maybe something like that. I completely forgot about that for a second. So like I said, a lot of very interesting developments that I cannot wait to see how everything plays out. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.